That ugly mud pit makes this entire neighborhood look cheap, Ethan. Lorraine Voss said it in front of 2 HOA board members, then pointed down at the retention basin on my land, like she was showing them something I ought to be ashamed of. It's there for a reason, I told her. She smiled. It's a hole in the ground. 2 days later, I left town. When I came back, dump trucks had filled the basin, a grader had packed it flat, and fresh sod covered the whole thing. Lorraine stood on top of it and told me the HOA had finally fixed the problem. I took pictures and checked the forecast. Because Lorraine had just erased the one place her entire subdivision was designed to send water when the drains couldn't handle it. To understand why that patch of ground mattered, you have to know what it looked like before Lorraine decided it offended her. My name is Ethan Mercer. I'm 46 and I own 18.6 acres outside Knoxville, Tennessee. Most mornings I'm in a red and black flannel shirt with welding dust on the sleeves because I run a small mobile welding and farm equipment repair business out of a steel shop behind my house. I fix cracked loader arms, bent trailer tongues, mower decks, gates, whatever somebody can drag or limp into the yard. It isn't glamorous work, but it pays the bills, and it keeps me close to home. The land came from my father, Walter. He bought it long before Stonegate Ridge existed. Dad died 8 years ago, and there are still places on that property where I hear his voice without trying. The old pecan tree by the drive. The workbench he built too high because he was 6'4", and the low ground behind the shop. Never build in the low spot, he used to say. That was the whole lecture. No diagrams, no engineering vocabulary, just a man pointing at a bowl-shaped patch of grass and telling his son not to be stupid. That low spot covered a little over half an acre. Most of the year it looked like an unfinished field. The bottoms stayed greener than everything around it. Cattails grew along one edge. After a dry August, the clay cracked into little brown plates that popped under your boots. After a hard rain, though, the whole depression changed. Water came through 2 big storm pipes from the hillside north of me, spread across the basin, rose for a few hours, then drained down slowly through an outlet on the far side. It could hold about 1.4 acre-feet of water. That's roughly 450,000 gallons. I didn't know that number growing up. I just knew the low spot filled and emptied. Stonegate Ridge went in uphill from us in 2007. 286 homes, curving streets, decorative stone entrance, black mailboxes, matching streetlights, the whole package. The developer paved over a lot of ground that used to absorb rain, so they needed somewhere for runoff to go. They worked out an agreement with my father. Their storm pipes could discharge toward the basin, and the association would have a narrow access strip around those outlets for inspection and maintenance. Dad kept ownership of the land. For years, nobody had a problem with that arrangement. The HOA inspected the pipe mouths once or twice a year. I mowed around the basin when it needed it. Water came, water left. Nobody held a meeting about grass height. Then Lorraine Voss became HOA president. Lorraine was 54, tall, blonde, polished, and almost aggressively put together. The first time she came to my shop in her bright fuchsia pantsuit and pink heels, she stepped across my gravel like the stones had personally disappointed her. Behind her, the welder fan hummed, and hot steel gave off that sharp metallic smell you get after a fresh bead. She looked past me at the basin. That, she said, is hurting us. I thought she meant a broken pipe. She meant the view. Several of Stonegate's higher-priced homes backed toward my land, and Lorraine had decided the basin looked neglected. She wanted the cattails removed, the ground leveled, and decorative turf installed before spring listing season. I'm not in Stonegate, I said. I'm aware. Then your landscaping rules don't apply here. She gave me the patient smile people use when they think you're slow. The community has drainage rights over that area. Drainage rights aren't landscaping rights. Her smile tightened a fraction. We'll review that. Then she turned, heels crunching over my gravel, and walked back to her SUV. I remember watching her leave and thinking the whole thing was ridiculous. I should have taken it more seriously. Lorraine came back the following Tuesday with 2 board members and a leather folder tucked under one arm. I was outside the shop replacing a cracked bracket on a hay rake. The grinder was still spinning down in my hand, throwing off that burnt metal smell when she spoke. That ugly mud pit makes this entire neighborhood look cheap, Ethan. One board member stared at the ground. The other gave me an apologetic half smile. Lorraine pointed toward the basin. I told her again that it was there for a reason. She said, "It's a hole in the ground." Then she showed me a one-page HOA resolution authorizing corrective drainage maintenance and landscape restoration along Stonegate Ridge's southern boundary. I read it twice. "The board has acted," she said. I told her nobody was touching my land until I checked the recorded easement. She called that obstruction. I called it Tuesday. 2 days later, I drove to an equipment auction in Cookeville. I left Friday morning and got back Sunday afternoon. I knew something was wrong before I reached the shop. Deep tire marks cut into the shoulder by my gate. Red Tennessee clay had dried in the road. The air smelled like diesel and fresh-cut sod. Then I rounded the shop. The basin was gone. Not trimmed. Not cleaned up. Gone. Where the half-acre bowl had been, there was a broad lawn. Fresh sod covered the fill in neat green strips. The 2 storm pipes still stuck out from the upper edge, except now they pointed toward ground that sat several feet higher than before. I walked the perimeter without stepping onto the new work. Dump truck tracks crossed my field. A survey pin near the west edge had been bent almost flat. A smear of hydraulic oil darkened the gravel turn-in. Then Lorraine arrived. She stepped out of her SUV and walked onto the sod like she was unveiling a putting green. "You're welcome," she said. I asked who gave her permission to bring heavy equipment onto my property. "The association exercised its drainage maintenance rights. You filled the drainage area. We corrected an unsightly depression." "Those are different sentences." Her expression hardened. "The work is finished, Ethan." I looked at the grade, then the pipe mouths. "Did you authorize this?" "The board did." "Did you?" She sighed. "Yes, I authorized the contractor to proceed under the resolution." That answer mattered, but I wanted it in writing. So I did something Lorraine wasn't expecting. Nothing. I didn't grab a shovel. I didn't threaten anybody. I photographed the tire tracks, pipe elevations, damaged marker, and contractor sign. Then I copied the video files from my shop cameras before the system could overwrite them. The footage was better than I expected. At 7:12 Friday morning, the first dump truck entered. By noon, trucks were cycling through every few minutes. A tracked loader pushed fill far beyond the narrow strip where the pipe access area was supposed to be. At one point, the operator stopped beside the western fence, climbed down, kicked one of my old marker stakes loose, and tossed it toward the machine. That little moment told me something. They were not confused about where they were. They had seen the boundary and kept working. I also photographed the white contractor placard they had left near the road. The company name gave me a place to start tracing who had ordered the work, when the trucks had been dispatched, and what the HOA had actually paid. That evening, I emailed Lorraine. "Please confirm that you personally authorized the grading and filling work completed on my property between Friday and Sunday, under HOA authority." She answered 23 minutes later. "Correct. The association acted within its recorded drainage rights." I printed that email. Then I called Nolan Price, a licensed surveyor I'd used on a fence line. "Have you moved any of the fill?" he asked. "No." "Good. Don't." He told me the cleanest case started with preserving the condition exactly as the other side left it. Survey the boundary, survey the easement, document the changed grade. Then decide what to do. The next morning I walked the edge of that new lawn with coffee. Dew sat on the sod like silver beads. Underneath it was nearly 1,900 cubic yards of imported fill, about 112 truckloads I'd later learn. Lorraine thought the sod made the argument disappear. All it really did was preserve the evidence under a nice green cover. If somebody crosses a line on your property, document the line before you start fixing what they did. Nolan came out Monday morning with a robotic total station, a bundle of stakes, and the expression of a man who had already decided he was going to charge me for extra coffee. He started at the recorded corner near my driveway and worked north toward the Stonegate pipes. The old plat was clear. My property line ran exactly where I thought it did. More important, the HOA's drainage easement was only 20 feet wide around the 2 discharge pipes, just enough for inspection equipment and routine maintenance. The new fill spread hundreds of feet beyond it. Nolan set bright stakes along the easement edge, then shot elevations across the flattened basin. He didn't say much until he finished. Finally, he looked at the new lawn and said, "Whatever right they had here, it wasn't a right to do all that." I emailed his preliminary survey to Lorraine before lunch. Her reply arrived that afternoon. Thank you. HOA counsel will respond. That sounded more official than you're welcome, and within 3 days I learned why. A certified envelope showed up at my house demanding $9,800 for emergency drainage remediation costs attributable to owner neglect. According to the letter, I had failed to maintain the basin in a condition consistent with the community's drainage needs, forcing the association to act. If I didn't reimburse the HOA within 30 days, the association reserved every available legal remedy. I read it twice at my kitchen table. Then I laughed. Not because $9,800 was funny. It wasn't. I laughed because the same people who had just called the basin useless were now billing me for supposedly failing to maintain it. Lorraine had moved from "it's a hole in the ground" to "we had no choice but to fix your critical drainage feature in less than a week." That takes flexibility. My first instinct was to hire the meanest lawyer I could find and send back a letter with enough legal language to make everybody miserable. Nolan talked me out of it. Before you pay somebody $300 an hour to read documents, he said, go get the documents. So I drove to the county register's office and started with the basics: deed recorded, plat, easement. Then I went to planning and asked for the original Stonegate Ridge development file. Some of it had been digitized, some of it still lived in banker boxes with labels written in fading marker. While the county staff searched, Lorraine went public. Stonegate's weekly email praised the board for correcting a long-neglected drainage and mosquito hazard along the southern boundary. The message didn't name me, but it included a photograph of the fresh sod, with the back of my shop visible in the corner. A real estate agent in the neighborhood reposted it with a caption about improved views for upcoming spring listings. A few days later, I attended the HOA's regular meeting. I wasn't there to make a speech. I brought copies of Nolan's survey. Lorraine sat at the front table in her fuchsia suit, gold necklace catching the fluorescent light whenever she turned her head. When public comments started, I raised my hand. You're not a member of Stonegate Ridge, she said. No. Then, this portion is for members. I'm the owner of the property your association graded. The matter has been referred to council. Fine. I walked to the front and handed a survey copy to each board member. Lorraine didn't take hers. I set it on the table anyway and left. That night, rain moved in. Nothing dramatic, about 1.2 inches by morning, enough to wash pollen off the trucks and turn my gravel dark. At 7, Rhett Dorsey from Briarcrest called me. I barely knew him. Is water supposed to stand in our street, he asked. I drove to the edge of my property where I could see uphill. A storm inlet on Briarcrest had water pooled around it 6 inches deep. That had never happened during a rain that small. The water wasn't racing anywhere. It was simply collecting, waiting for room downstream. Lorraine posted a notice blaming leaf debris. I checked the pipe outlets. They were clear. Then I put a legal rain gauge beside my shop, took photographs of the watermarks, and wrote down the time. The storm passed before noon. The street drained. No property was damaged. But I had seen enough to stop thinking this was only a trespass case. The grade had changed the way Stonegate emptied, and the rain had just given me the first small demonstration. The county finally found Stonegate's original planning file 2 days later. Before I dug through it, I wanted one answer that didn't require interpreting anything. I went to the stormwater counter and asked, was a grading permit issued for about 1,900 cubic yards of fill on my parcel last weekend? The clerk searched by address, parcel number, contractor name, and Stonegate's HOA account. No, she said. Any permit to alter the drainage basin? Another search. No. That was the first time somebody outside the dispute looked genuinely concerned. The county sent Tessa Ward, a stormwater field inspector, out the next morning. Tessa was practical. No speeches, no instant conclusions. She walked the filled area with a level rod, photographed the pipe mouths, measured the changed slope, and asked me to show her exactly what I had done since the contractor left. Nothing, I said. You haven't excavated it? No. Moved any soil? No. Blocked the outlets? No. I showed her the camera footage and Lorraine's email confirming she had authorized the work. Tessa read the email on my phone, handed it back and said, keep that. The county issued a notice of unpermitted grading and ordered all further earthworks stopped until engineered documents could be reviewed. Lorraine treated it like a missing restaurant permit. Her next email to Stonegate residents said the association was working cooperatively with county staff to complete routine post-project documentation. Post-project documentation. That was one way to describe asking permission after the bulldozers had gone home. Then the HOA hired a civil engineering firm. A week later, Lorraine presented a concept for replacing the old open basin with buried stormwater pipes and a large underground storage vault. The surface could remain lawn. The neighborhood would keep its improved view. Everybody wins. Except the preliminary estimate was $420,000. I heard about that number from Rhett before I saw the plan. He showed up at my shop holding a printed HOA memo. They want $1,850 from every house, he said. $18.50. I wish. $1,850. I whacked my hands on a rag and read the memo. Lorraine was calling it the Stonegate Resilience Upgrade. The proposed special assessment would fund engineering, underground storage drainage improvements, and future-ready landscape integration. I looked at Rhett. You had storage. Where? I pointed through the open shop door. Under the sod. He stared at the flattened field for a second. Wait, that thing could hold all this water? About 450,000 gallons. His face changed. Rhett had supported Lorraine's beautification campaign. He didn't hide that. He liked clean entrances and trimmed common areas. None of that made him stupid. Why didn't anyone tell us that? I'm still finding out what your documents say. A second rain came 2 nights later. 1.8 inches. This time Briarcrest took water from curb to curb for almost 20 minutes. The playground swale overflowed. 2 homeowners stacked sandbags in front of their garage doors. Nobody flooded badly, but the pattern was getting harder to dismiss. I stood under the roof overhang of my shop and watched runoff hammer out of the 2 pipes. The sound was different now. Instead of spreading down into the old bowl, it slapped against the raised grade and fanned sideways through wet grass. Fresh sod squished under the water like a soaked carpet. Rhett came down in a rain jacket. So where did it go before? I pointed at the middle of the lawn. Right there. Lorraine blamed what she called an unusually concentrated weather event. The county's own rain gauge, 5 miles away, said otherwise. Tessa came back the next day and photographed the high water marks. She still wouldn't speculate about liability, which I respected. But she did ask one question. Do you have the original drainage calculations? Not yet. Find them. So I went back to the county archive. This time, instead of pulling only the easement and plat, I asked for every stormwater sheet tied to Stonegate's 2007 approval, hydrology calculations, drainage maps, detention assumptions, revision notes, everything. A records clerk rolled out a stack of large plan sheets on a table. Most of them looked like alphabet soup with contour lines. I traced streets I recognized, pipe numbers, arrows, little elevation notes, and drainage areas, broken into colored pencil marks from an old review meeting. Then one label jumped out at me. B2. It was printed right over the low ground on my property. And underneath it, in block letters, were 4 words that changed the argument completely. Emergency Storage Area B2. I asked the records clerk if I could photograph the entire sheet. Then I sat there and read it. B2 wasn't a nickname. It was part of Stonegate Ridge's approved stormwater design. The subdivision had been divided into drainage areas, and the engineers had calculated how much runoff would leave the pavement and rooftops during heavy rain. The pipes carried that water downhill, but the pipes were only one part of the system. The other part was empty space. My low ground was supposed to take the overflow when the pipe network hit its limit. The engineering table listed the required temporary storage volume at roughly 1.4 acre-feet. That was the same 450,000 gallons I had grown up watching appear and disappear after storms. Without that volume, the math didn't work. One note in the engineer's review was even more specific. During peak runoff, B2 was expected to receive water after upstream structures reached their operating level, then release it gradually after the storm passed. It wasn't decorative drainage. It was reserve capacity. That distinction mattered. A pipe moves water. Storage gives water somewhere to wait. Lorraine had spent nearly $30,000 making sure there was nowhere for it to wait. I kept reading. Attached to the plans was the recorded stormwater access and maintenance agreement my father had signed with the original developer. This time I read every paragraph instead of stopping at the easement description. The language was plain enough. Walter Mercer retained ownership. The association received limited access around the 2 outlets for inspection and maintenance. Then came the part Lorraine apparently never bothered to read. The association was required to preserve the storage capacity and outlet function of Emergency Storage Area B2. Any material alteration required written consent from the property owner and approval from the County Stormwater Authority. There was one more clause. Damage resulting from alterations performed by the association or its agents would be the association's responsibility. There was no exception for beautification, no line about property values, no clause saying a board resolution could substitute for county approval. I leaned back in the county chair and looked at that paragraph for a long time. Lorraine's entire argument was built around one phrase: maintenance access. But the easement existed so Stonegate could maintain the drainage system, not redesign my property. She had used the right to protect B2 as her excuse to erase B2. I called Nolan from the parking lot. I found the original agreement. Good, better than good. I read him the storage clause. Silence. Then he said, so she didn't just grade outside the easement. No. She deleted part of their approved system. That's what it looks like. The next call was Tessa. She asked me to email the plan sheet and agreement immediately. 2 hours later, she called back. Her tone had changed. We're opening a formal review against the Stonegate drainage approval, she said. Do not alter the site. I won't. That afternoon, I made 3 copies of the agreement. One went in the safe in my office. One went to Nolan. One stayed on my kitchen table beside Lorraine's $9,800 demand. For the first time since I came home and saw that new lawn, I wasn't guessing what the basin was for. I didn't have to convince anyone it was useful. Stonegate's own approved plans had already done that 19 years earlier. Before arguing about what an HOA says it can do, find the document that created the right in the first place. Finding the agreement changed my position, but it didn't mean I wanted to charge into court the next morning. That's where Marla Keene came in. Marla was a land use attorney in Knoxville. I hired her for a limited consultation, brought a banker box to her office, and spent the first 20 minutes laying out the survey, the county notice, Lorraine's email, the contractor footage, and the B2 documents. She read quietly. When she finished, she asked, "What do you want my land restored? Anything else? I want them to stop pretending they had the right to do it. That second part is going to happen on its own if the first part is documented correctly." I liked her immediately. Marla's first instruction was the same as Nolan's. Do not excavate the fill yourself. Do not block Stonegate's outlet pipes. Do not redirect runoff. And definitely do not improvise some clever revenge project that would give the HOA a new argument about causation. You have a clean fact pattern, she said. Keep it clean. So instead of building a trap for Lorraine, we built a trap for bad explanations. Nolan returned with archived contour data from the old plat and shot a full topographic survey. He marked the former basin rim with bright stakes, then marked the original bottom elevation and the 20-foot HOA access strip. The new lawn looked almost absurd with those stakes sticking out of it, like somebody had tried to turn a football field into a geometry lesson. I mounted 2 weatherproof cameras on posts entirely inside my property line. One watched the outlet pipes. The other watched the old B2 footprint and the slope back towards Stonegate. Beside the shop, I set a calibrated rain gauge and a simple graduated water level staff where runoff could be measured from a safe distance. Tessa came out and recorded the baseline locations in the county file. That part was important. If I alone measured everything after a storm, Lorraine could say I chose the numbers. If the surveyor and county had documented the starting points before the storm, the evidence no longer depended on my opinion. Meanwhile, Marla sent the HOA a certified preservation and restoration demand. It was not theatrical. It listed the recorded agreement, the county's no permit finding the survey limits, and the condition of the site. It demanded that Stonegate preserve all board communications, contractor records, invoices, and engineering files. It also gave the HOA an opportunity to submit a lawful restoration plan before I filed a civil claim. The contractor invoices arrived through HOA financial records a few days later. $29,740. No engineering plan attached. No county permit number. No written consent from me. The invoice described the work as grading, fill placement, finish contour sod restoration. That phrase finish contour was doing a lot of work for a project whose entire problem was the contour. Rhett started helping in a quieter way. He didn't circulate petitions. He asked neighbors who had seen new ponding to save their photographs with the original timestamps. He told them not to crop the images or write on them. A few homeowners sent pictures from the first 2 rains. I created folders by date: rainfall, high water marks, resident photos, county documents, HOA communications. It wasn't exciting. Nobody makes a movie montage about file names. But disputes are full of people who remember things perfectly until a date matters. Then the forecast changed. A slow-moving front was building west of us. The Weather Service said the Knoxville area could see several inches if the system stalled. I stood at the back window of the shop and looked at Lorraine's smooth new lawn. The county process was already strong enough without a storm. The recorded agreement was enough to force a restoration review. But if heavy rain came, the physical question would answer itself. Where would 450,000 gallons of missing storage show up? Marla called that afternoon. Forecast looks ugly, she said. I saw. You are not doing anything to those pipes. I know. No barriers. No trenches. No helping physics make your case. Marla, I weld farm equipment. I'm not building a dam. Good. Lawyers like boring clients. I checked both camera batteries, confirmed the memory cards, and left the ground alone. Then I photographed the setup itself, including the time on my phone and the stake numbers Nolan had placed. It felt excessive, which usually means you are finally documenting something properly. That was the whole plan. Survey it before. Record it during. Let the county measure it after. The strongest counterattack is sometimes making sure the next fact can't be argued about. Lorraine's next move wasn't engineering. It was public relations. 2 days after Marla's certified letter arrived, Stonegate residents received an email titled "Important Drainage Clarification." It said the association was being prevented from completing necessary safety work because the commercial property owner downhill from Stonegate had restricted community access and threatened legal action. That commercial property owner was me. Apparently Ethan, whose family has owned the land longer than Stonegate has existed, didn't fit the message. The email said I had refused to cooperate, demanded compensation, and created uncertainty around emergency drainage. It never mentioned that the HOA had filled B2 without a permit. It never mentioned Lorraine's written authorization. And it definitely didn't mention the county order stopping further work. Rhett forwarded it to me with one line. "She's making you the reason we have a problem." I sent it to Marla. Her response was even shorter. "Save it." That became our policy for Lorraine. Save it. A day later, my West camera caught a Stonegate maintenance pickup driving onto my field. 2 employees got out. One pointed at Nolan's bright survey stakes. The other pulled 3 of them from the ground and tossed them into the truck bed. I was inside the shop, 30 yards away. For about 10 seconds, every instinct I had told me to walk outside and ask them what they thought they were doing. Then I looked at the camera monitor. They were documenting themselves better than I ever could. I stayed inside. When they left, I called Nolan. He came out that afternoon, replaced the stakes from his coordinates, and made a note in his field log. Marla sent another certified notice telling the HOA that removal of survey markers and entry outside the recorded easement had been captured on video. She requested no further access except through county-approved inspection. Lorraine replied through counsel that the workers believed the stakes were interfering with maintenance. Nolan read that and shook his head. They were 60 feet outside the easement. Maybe they're very ambitious maintenance stakes, he laughed. It was the first funny thing about the whole week. Then the county rejected Stonegate's proposed underground replacement. The engineer's concept had larger pipes and an underground vault, but the submitted calculations did not reproduce the lost B2 storage volume under the approved storm scenario. The county required either restoration of B2 or a fully engineered alternative that matched or exceeded the original performance. Lorraine did not put that in her newsletter. Instead, Stonegate announced a special membership meeting to vote on the proposed $1,850 assessment. The notice still called it the Stonegate Resilience Upgrade. Rhett found the county rejection on the public permit portal. Within hours, screenshots were circulating among residents. People started asking why the board wanted a vote on a $420,000 replacement system the county had already rejected. Lorraine answered that the plan was undergoing routine technical refinement. That was the phrase. Routine technical refinement. I was starting to think her real talent was finding 6 words to avoid one honest sentence. The forecast worsened. The Weather Service moved us into a heavier rainfall band. 2 to 4 inches were possible, more if the front stalled over the foothills. Stonegate rented portable pumps. That sounded reassuring, until somebody asked where the pumps would send the water. One hose was planned toward the roadside ditch, another toward a common area swale. Both ultimately discharged downhill toward the same drainage network that had just lost its overflow storage. They had spent nearly $30,000 eliminating a basin, and were now spending HOA money renting machines to imitate what gravity used to do for free. Tessa called me late that afternoon. "The county is issuing a formal directive tomorrow," she said, "for restoration for required storage capacity. They'll have to submit a compliant restoration plan. The current condition can't remain." I asked if she had seen the forecast. "Yes." "What should I do?" "Stay out of the flow path. Keep your cameras where they are. Call us if there is property damage or a public safety issue." That evening, Lorraine sent one more email to residents. She called the coming storm a real-world validation opportunity for the association's temporary measures. I read that sentence twice. Then I went outside and checked my rain gauge. The sky over the ridge had turned the flat gray color Tennessee gets before a long rain. For the first time since the basin was filled, Lorraine and I were about to get the same test. The difference was that only one of us had been reading the original plans. The county directive arrived Thursday morning. Stonegate had to restore the required emergency storage capacity or submit a county-approved engineered equivalent. Until that happened, no additional grading was allowed on my property. Lorraine received the directive 4 days before the special assessment meeting. She did not cancel the meeting. By 3 that afternoon, the rain started. At first it was ordinary late summer rain. Steady, warm, almost soft. Water ticked against the metal roof of my shop. The gravel darkened, little streams formed along the tire ruts and disappeared into the grass. I checked the gauge at 4, half an inch. At 5:30, the outlet pipes started running hard. The camera facing Stonegate showed brown water rushing from both concrete mouths and spreading across the new sod. For a while, the lawn handled it. The soil darkened, water slipped between the seams in the turf, then the grade filled. That was the strange part to watch. The water kept arriving, but there was no low bowl for it to occupy. Instead of dropping into storage, it pushed sideways and began stacking against the raised ground. The shallow sheet widened. The edge moved back toward the pipe mouths. By 7, Briarcrest was taking water. Rhett called. "You seeing this?" "I'm watching it. My driveway's covered. Stay out of moving water." He hung up to move things in his garage. I put on a rain jacket and walked only as far as the high side of my shop. The rain had picked up enough that it hissed against the gravel. Lightning flashed somewhere beyond the ridge, and a second later thunder rolled low through the valley. The fresh sod began lifting. Not all at once. First a corner curled, then a seam opened. Water got underneath and peeled a strip upward like somebody pulling back wet carpet. Mud boiled through the gaps. By 9, the HOA's portable pumps were running. One discharge hose had to be moved because it was sending water toward another homeowner's low yard. The second pump lost suction twice because debris clogged the intake. I didn't enjoy any of it. That's worth saying. It's easy to talk about consequences when the consequence is a board president looking embarrassed in a meeting. It feels different when a retired man you barely know is trying to keep water away from the freezer in his garage. Rhett called again. I could use another set of hands. I drove to his house by the upper entrance away from the deepest water and helped him lift the freezer onto blocks. We moved a tool chest, 2 boxes of family photos, and a stack of drywall he'd been saving for a basement project. Across Briarcrest, neighbors were doing the same thing. At one house, water slipped under the garage door by an inch or 2. At another, kids' bicycles floated against a storage shelf. Nobody was in danger. No house was swept away. But 14 backyards held standing water by midnight, and the clubhouse parking lot had become a shallow, brown lake. Lorraine was outside in a raincoat directing pump crews. At one point, she saw me standing with Red. "This is exactly why we needed unrestricted access," she shouted over the rain. I looked at the water around her boots. "To the basin you filled." She turned away. By 1 in the morning, my gauge read 3.7 inches. The rain finally weakened before dawn. At first light, I checked the cameras. They had captured everything. The outlet flow, the spreading water, the raised sod acting like a shallow barrier, the water level moving back towards Stonegate. The timestamps matched the rain gauge record. Nolan's stakes gave scale. The county's baseline survey gave elevations. At 8:30, Tessa arrived with another county employee. They photographed high water marks along Briarcrest and the clubhouse lot. They measured the edge of inundation against the survey points. They inspected the pipe outlets and the flattened B2 footprint. Residents started gathering. Not around me. Around the county truck. They wanted answers from somebody who wasn't selling them an assessment. A local television crew showed up before lunch after homeowners sent video of the flooded streets. By then, Lorraine's real-world validation opportunity email had been forwarded so many times that even Tessa had seen it. The special meeting was still scheduled for Saturday, except now nobody was calling it an assessment meeting. Stonegate's board sent a new notice. Emergency drainage and governance meeting. Marla called me after she read it. "What are you taking for the recorded agreement? Survey, invoice, Lorraine's email, camera video. Good. Anything else? No speeches. No stack of 20 documents. Let the county explain the engineering. And me show them who authorized it." Saturday night, Lorraine was going to stand in front of the neighborhood she had just tried to charge $420,000. And this time, the empty space she erased was going to be visible on a projector. The Stonegate clubhouse held maybe 150 people comfortably. That Saturday, every chair was full. Residents stood along the back wall and spilled into the hallway. Some carried folders, some had flood photos on their phones. One man still had mud on his work boots. A sheriff's deputy stood near the entrance because the board had asked for crowd control. A local TV camera was set up in the rear corner. Lorraine arrived 5 minutes before 7 in the same bold fuchsia suit I had seen at earlier meetings, small gold earrings catching the overhead light. Everything about her still looked controlled, except her hands. They moved faster than usual as she arranged her papers. She called the meeting to order. "I know emotions are high," she began. "And I understand several residents experienced inconvenience during an exceptional rainfall event." Somebody in back said inconvenienced. Lorraine ignored it. She blamed historic rainfall aging county drainage and restricted access to downstream property. That last part was aimed at me. I sat beside Marla in the third row. Then Lorraine introduced Tessa and county stormwater engineer Marcus Bell. Marcus walked to the projector. He didn't start with the storm. He started with 2007. The screen showed Stonegate Ridge's approved drainage map, streets pipes, contour lines, drainage arrows. Then he zoomed in on the southern boundary. Emergency Storage Area B2. Marcus explained it without jargon. Stonegate's approved system was designed with temporary overflow storage on the Mercer parcel. The pipe network moves runoff. B2 gives excess runoff somewhere to remain when capacity is exceeded. He placed the original contour survey beside Nolan's current survey. The old drawing showed a bowl. The new drawing showed a raised lawn. "The required storage volume is no longer present," Lorraine interrupted. The association was exercising maintenance rights under the drainage easement. Marcus looked at her. "Maintenance rights do not change the county-approved storage requirement." Next slide. "No grading permit. No approved modification. The after-the-fact underground proposal denied. Rainfall 3.7 inches at my gauge, consistent with nearby county measurements." Then Marcus said, "The storm was significant, but rainfall does not explain the removal of required storage capacity. The system was approved with B2 in place." Lorraine's jaw tightened. The association had every reason to believe the area was obsolete. That was my turn. Marla and I walked to the front. I brought 4 things. First, the recorded agreement. I read the sentence requiring Stonegate to preserve B2's storage capacity and outlet function. Second, Lorraine's email confirming she personally authorized the grading. Third, the contractor invoiced $29,740 for grading, fill placement, finish contour, and sod. Then I put the camera video on the projector. The room got quiet. Rainwater blasted from the outlet pipes. The timestamp advanced. Water spread across the sod. A turf seam lifted and folded back. Then water began moving toward Stonegate's streets. Nolan's bright stakes were visible in the frame. Nobody needed an engineering degree to understand it. Lorraine stood. The easement gave us the right to maintain drainage. I held up the agreement. It says you have to preserve the storage. We could not have predicted this weather. Marcus answered first. The original engineer predicted runoff events. That is why B2 appears on the approved plan. Board Treasurer Harlan Pike turned toward Lorraine. Why are we asking residents for $1,850 each to replace something we were required to preserve? A woman from Briarcrest held up a phone showing water in her garage. My property value liked the old hole better. That got the first laugh of the night. Lorraine pointed at me. He set this up. He knew the storm was coming and stood there filming it. I knew rain was coming. So did everybody with a weather app. You wanted this to happen. No. I pointed to the old contour on the screen. I wanted you to leave that alone. Then I gave her the one line I had rehearsed. I didn't set the water up, Lorraine. You filled the empty space your own plans were counting on. The room went silent. Harlan moved to cancel the special assessment, authorize county-compliant restoration, and suspend Lorraine's authority pending a recall vote. Another board member seconded it. The vote wasn't close. Hands rose across the room. Lorraine sat down before the count was finished. For weeks she had treated the Basin like an argument she could win by controlling the language. On that screen, the water had taken language out of it. Physics had entered the meeting minutes. The county did not let Stonegate improvise its way out of the problem. Within 10 days, the new interim board hired an independent drainage firm. Their first recommendation was the simplest one: put B2 back. That meant removing nearly 1,900 cubic yards of fill, rebuilding the original contours from Nolan's survey, and the archived plans, stabilizing the slopes and restoring the outlet function. The work took 6 weeks. This time there were permits. This time there were inspection stakes. And this time, nobody drove a loader onto my property until I had the plan in writing. The restoration cost came in around $78,000 after engineering excavation, haul-off stabilization, and replanting. The contractor's liability carrier eventually reimbursed a substantial portion because the original grading had been performed without the approvals required by the project documents. Stonegate's reserves covered the remainder. The proposed $1,850 assessment was canceled. My property claims settled separately. The HOA paid $22,500, covering survey costs, legal expenses, damaged soil, and the time required to restore areas outside the Basin footprint. It wasn't a lottery ticket. It put me where I should have been before Lorraine decided a contour line was an aesthetic problem. Her recall became formal at the next membership meeting. She lost the presidency and resigned from the board soon afterward. I didn't attend the final vote. By then, I had spent enough evenings inside the Stonegate clubhouse to last me a while. The new board did something less dramatic and more useful. It published contracts, engineering records, meeting minutes, and major expenditure approvals on the resident portal. They also amended their internal procedures, so no work could be ordered on B2 without written owner notice, a board vote, an engineering plan, and county approval. The basin itself came back slowly. At first it looked raw. Freshly graded earth erosion matting little green shoots where native seed had been spread along the rim. Then the grasses took. The county allowed a native meadow buffer around the storage area, so instead of trying to disguise it as a manicured lawn, we planted things that could handle wet feet and dry summers. Rhett helped. So did a dozen Stonegate residents who had spent the storm moving boxes off garage floors. That fall, the neighborhood started an annual Stormwater Day. It sounds like the kind of event only an engineer could love, but families showed up. They cleared leaves from catch basins, marked drainage easements, planted native grass, and had the county bring out a simple display showing where runoff went after it disappeared into a street drain. Turns out people care about boring infrastructure right after boring infrastructure stops being boring. I put one small metal sign beside B2. Stormwater storage area, keep clear. No landscaping slogan. No decorative border. Just the truth. The first big rain after restoration came in spring. I stood under the shop awning and watched water pour from the Stonegate pipes. It ran into the basin spread across the low ground and rose several feet. Then it stopped. Briarcrest stayed dry. No sandbags, no pumps. No neighbors calling each other about garage floors. A few hours after the rain ended, the water began dropping exactly the way it used to. I could smell wet clay and cut grass. Rain tapped on the steel roof above me. For a minute I thought about Dad pointing at that same low place years ago. Never build in the low spot. I used to think he was talking about where to put a barn. Maybe he was. But standing there, I understood the bigger part. Sometimes the most useful thing on a piece of land is the part nobody built on. If you've ever watched an HOA mistake control for ownership, tell me about it in the comments. And if you like stories where paperwork, patience, and a little common sense beat a bad decision, subscribe and share this one with somebody who's dealt with an HOA of their own. You know, the part I keep coming back to isn't the flooded parking lot, or even Lorraine losing that vote. It's Ethan standing there, with a recorded plan while everybody else had been arguing about what they thought the land was for. That basin held roughly 450,000 gallons. Most days, it did absolutely nothing you could see, and that was the point. It was just empty ground doing a quiet job until the one day everybody needed it. I've seen that pattern with HOA fights before. Somebody gets a title, a letterhead, maybe a lawyer's signature, and suddenly confidence starts sounding a lot like ownership. Ethan never had to match Lorraine's volume. He just kept the emails pulled, the survey found, the agreement, and let the facts stay put long enough to be seen. I'm curious, if your HOA had done something like that on your property, would you have been able to leave the site untouched and document it first? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoy these stories, give the video a like, subscribe, and share it with somebody who has an HOA story of their own. Sometimes the smartest thing you can protect is the space somebody else thinks is useless.